Hello and welcome to the Business Buying Brit podcast. If you are looking to build wealth through buying and operating small businesses, this is the place for you. We'll be telling the stories of the men and women who have gone before you, how they've done it, hearing what has gone well, and importantly, what has not gone well. Ultimately, our goal is to learn from their wisdom so that your journey to buying that first business successfully can be accelerated. Hello and welcome to the Business Buying Brit podcast, episode 6. Today we have Mr. Chandra Rao. Chandra has acquired 5 businesses since 2018. He has stories of successes and challenges and is here today to share his story. Chandra, thank you so much for being here today.
James, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I have loved, hearing about everything you've been up to over the last few years. When we've originally connected, I believe that your first business was purchased in 2018, but from speaking a little bit more just before the show, I found out that actually wasn't the first business you acquired. So what I'd love you to do is start by telling us what happened in 2014 for you, and also when that came about, as you explain it, what were you doing at that point in time of your life when that opportunity came about?
Yeah, so in 2014, I was working at a software company. I just finished my MBA, and a friend of mine who was really interested in startups, he built an inventory SaaS application that connected to Square. So all these small vendors needed help tracking their inventory through their point of sale system. He needed some investment, so I was like, all right, well, I'll invest. You're my fraternity brother. I don't expect this to go anywhere, but I'm going to do this because you're my friend. Fast forward, we were making a little bit of money, not enough for anybody to live off of. So he was doing this full time. He's like, look, I've got to get started on another project. I need to do something else just to be able to support my lifestyle, my family. It's like, all right, well, I'll buy the remaining shares. My initial investment, I think, got me 15% of the company. Said, well, based off where you're at, I know you've been living, really lean. How about this? I'll do a bunch of zero balance transfers on credit cards for all the credit card debt that you've accumulated, because he'd been putting in his heart, soul, sweat, everything into this business. And just to get him out from some of that, all right, let's just put it on these credit cards. The cash flow from the business will just go to pay that off, and we'll move forward. The company continued to chug along. Memberships were on the uptick, and it was one of the better investments I'd made. I think I'd made 2.5, 3x on my money after paying off the credit card debt. So very interesting foray into business acquisition.
Right. No, I like it. So it kind of happened by accident. You invest in your friend's company. He then is struggling and wants to move on to something else. Yep. And then you kind of helping your friend out, put all of this, use 0% credit cards to buy them out and then keep it going enough to kind of triple your money. I mean, that sounds like a success in terms of relationship with your friend, and also financially, I guess it got you that first exposure.
Absolutely. Because I had not, my thought process in the past wasn't about buying cash flow or buying businesses or anything along those lines. It was historically, let me just invest in the S&P 500. Let me invest in tech stocks and see how things go. This really helped open me up to that, this new part of the world of business acquisition.
No, I like it a lot. And I don't want to fast forward too much, but do you still buy companies using credit cards?
No, no, it's been a lot of mix of seller financing, traditional bank debt, and now actually looking at the SBA. So a mix of different ways of purchasing.
Okay, nice. So after this first kind of experience or exposure into this world, what happened between then and 2018, I believe, is when you bought your first business, an electrical contractor. What were you doing in those interim years, and how did that first opportunity come about?
Yeah, so I continued to work in software. So I joined a smaller company, was very fortunate in that it went up like a rocket ship. I think I was the 200th employee or something like that when I had left. It was 3,000. We'd gone through an IPO and, was able to take the gains from that and say, hey, let's look at other investments. So my business partner and I, we've known each other for almost 2 decades now. We knew each other from Thai boxing, so we used to hit each other in the head, and that formed the bonds of friendship that carry us through to this day.
I like it.
And so we were at a point where he was looking at transitioning out of a family business, and maybe joining corporate America. We got in this conversation of, hey, let's just buy a business. He's got some construction background. I personally don't know which end of the hammer to use to hit a nail. So it made a lot of sense for him to operate the first business that we purchased.
Okay, that makes sense. That's similar to my story in that the first one that I went into was construction as well. And my business partner has construction background and experience. I would not have done it without him. That first deal, I would have had to have gone for a different industry. And I was in the market at the time looking for other things. So it's nice how you kind of just married the partnership together, and you were comfortable going with it even though you didn't have the experience.
Yeah, and I think the trust is very important if you're doing it with a business partner. And this is, as we talk about the other acquisitions, I can talk through mistakes that were made in terms of giving too much trust to folks that we didn't necessarily have the same kind of relationship with. So
Were those
interesting
people,
to see.
as it continued and you kind of gave trust to people and you maybe regret it, were these partners, were these employees?
So a mix. So when we bought the first construction company, so we bought it, and it was all seller financed. And to own an electrical contractor, you need a master electrician. And the person selling it, they said, you know what, the HR has been difficult. I don't want to deal with the admin of finance. That was music to our ears. We thought, well, we can take over those functions, and he'll stay on board as the master electrician, and he'll also stay on as sales. So getting to know him for about a year and a half, it made sense to us to say, hey, let's lock him in as the master electrician and buy another electrical contractor. So from the beginning of 2018 into later part of 2019, and we closed on our second electrical contractor in 2020, we brought him into the mix as an equal partner through that acquisition of the next electrical contractor. And this is where the extending too much trust came into play. We came to find out afterwards. So we ended up buying his shares, in 22, so 2 years later. But we found out that he had been siphoning money off from the business. Found out that he was building. He used company funds to build himself a pool, a barn, and hide all the construction costs in different projects that were going on.
Wow.
So it was a lot of money grab, and it was a good lesson in saying, hey, we've got to make sure that if we bring on any equity partners, we've got to make sure that we vet them completely. Because vetting after the fact, finding out things like cheating on your taxes, ripping other people off, it all shows up in due diligence. We've just got to do a better job of that.
Right. That's great. There's a couple really good things I want to jump into there. So I do want to ask you about picking good partners, but first of all, if there's someone listening who's looking at buying their first business and they're terrified that once they're actually running the show, that there's going to be theft somewhere because they can't possibly have eyes over everything. Like, what are some key areas for people to look out for, maybe in their financial statements, other indicators that are red flags to be like, hey, I need to do a deep dive here just to make sure? Like, were there any things you missed, I guess, along the way to that this guy was actually siphoning money off?
Yeah, so trust but verify is definitely the adage to stick with. So in construction, when you're looking at things like cement costs or different building materials that are going against jobs, I think that was where he was able to siphon off the most amount of money, because those were just coming from our existing vendors, and they were going against jobs that required some of those materials. I think it's about knowing what your margin needs to be, where it ultimately ends up, and then if there's a big delta, really diving into each transaction, that and then credit card spend. So we, at the very onset, we did not have tight controls around whether it's, accounts with vendors or with credit card spend, and that's really where this person was able to siphon off a significant amount of money.
So it wasn't kickbacks from vendors that went into his pocket necessarily. Was it kind of fake vendors or fake invoices or?
No, so he wanted to build a pool for himself, as an example. So what he would do is he'd say, "Well, I'm going to buy the cement. That invoice is going to come through." He was also managing some of the QuickBooks classification, and he said, "Well, we're also doing a hotel build. I'll just put the cement cost against that hotel build." Those were some of the things, and then as we started the buyout process, the theft got even more aggressive. It was going directly to customers saying, "Hey, you know what? Instead of paying, the contractor, just pay me directly, and we'll call it even." So we found a lot of that as well.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm clear now. So it's kind of burying the costs in existing projects. You as a company were doing. I get it. Okay,
Yeah,
well that was a big learning point.
A lot. Yeah.
So based on that, what would your advice be? You've got one business partner, you used to punch each other in the face and it's going really well now. And then other ones where it hasn't gone quite so well. What advice would you have for people listening in terms of finding the right partner? Because most people, I always teach on my course, like 95% of people would do better in this game with a partner.
Right. So I'm a big fan of having somebody that has been in your life for some time. You've got a natural trust, but then having a really, really ironclad operating agreement, I think is a good way to go. Everybody is on the same kind of page. Everybody has the same rules of engagement, same rules of play to move forward, and I think that's the best approach.
Okay, so operating agreement. What about, have you explored any buy-sell agreements as part of the operating agreements?
Yes, absolutely. So having kind of the baseline for what the buy-sell is going to be, and I think if you're going to have a partner, especially if it's, if you're buying a company, if you're going to end up buying your business partner out, have a seller note. That is so key. When we were able to identify this theft, we had, I think it was a $200,000 seller note that we're able to hold back and say, "Hey, look, because you stole all of this, we're now looking at, well, we can go to court, we can show all these, ultimately felonies. What do you want to do here?" So we're able to hold that pot of money back. So having that seller note, absolutely key.
That's great. I like that. It's yet another benefit of seller financing, I think. So
yes,
that's good. So, this was 2018, then going into 2020 with the second one. During this period, you were living, from the business, profit. Did you have a W-2 at the same time, or that had long gone at that point? Or you did have a W-2 at that point?
So I kept my W-2 job, and it was, once again, it was a benefit of COVID. So in 2020, when the world kind of shut down, that week I was actually planning on resigning from my position because I was still consulting, going across the country, just traveling a lot. And it didn't make sense to try and take on more management at the businesses. But as soon as the world shut down, everything turned remote. It became a lot easier to do both. That being said, easier is not easy.
Right,
so it was still a lot of hours and things like that, but it's set up to be a lot more successful so that in times when the businesses were a little bit more lean, I still had a good cushion to not have to worry about taking money out of the business.
So it became easier, I'm emphasizing that, to do both at that point during COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd already had the seed in your head, given you were going to hand in your notice. Did you recalibrate and think like, okay, I'm going to push it out a year? Did you have like an intentional goal in your mind that you're working towards of when you were finally going to hand in that notice?
It ended up being basically, how much can I take? How much can I continue to burn the candle at both ends. And this is probably not the best strategy, as my wife can attest to that. I was probably more grumpy than I, should be. But that being said, I do remember driving out to job sites that were a couple of hours away just to learn what the team members were doing. So at this point in 2020, we had acquired a utility contractor. So a lot of horizontal drilling, putting fiber optic cable into the ground, things along those lines. And that was the business that I was going to take over as far as managing, just to even out the workload between my partners and learning that business while at the same time sitting in a truck on a hot spot, giving a presentation about spend management to a prospect was a challenge. I still crushed it. Don't get me wrong. I want to make sure that if folks from my old employer see it, they don't think I was half-assing. But it was that balance of, hey, I still got to learn all the things going on with this business. At the same time, I still have to do a really good job at the W-2 because I owe it to them.
Yeah, so you kind of focus on excellence. Maybe there was a period there where that balance wasn't, front and center by the sound of things. But it sounds like you did both just to kind of maximize your financial position before when did you finally actually end up leaving? And then did you end up managing the fiber optic cable company?
Yeah, so I ended up leaving in May of 21. And I still had, once again, it was for that company that had gone through an IPO. So I still had shares that were vesting. And then, after the birth of my first son, which was in March of 21, I thought, well, it's time for me to focus on having a little bit more balance. I can't do all of this with, a young kid at home. I don't want to be absent. Okay. So I did leave the W-2 job then, and then took over to managing the fiber optic company full time.
Okay, but you didn't exactly take it easy by the looks of things since that period of time, because then you have the horizontal drilling company was separate to the fiber splicing company, or are they kind of packaged together?
I guess they work. They're very synergistic. So the horizontal drilling company will put fiber optic cable in the ground, and then the fiber splicing company, they're a little bit more technical. They'll splice the cable together. They'll test it, make sure light data can travel, etc. But one is dependent on the other. But they're two separate entities.
Okay, and then today you oversee those companies, and your business partner
Correct.
Still oversees the electrical contracting companies.
Correct. And we've gotten to the point, and this is a lot of work with. We worked with a consulting group. Another, I'll do a plug for Bergflow. Another GoBundance member, Dirk Van Reenen, who runs that organization. Really focusing on empowering the leaders in the companies so that we're not in day-to-day activity. I focus my time on reviewing the financials, seeing how we can really create a sustainable culture so that we can acquire the best talent and we can really build as a great place to work. So it's on the business, not in the business.
Okay, I like that. And then before we lose the point on balance, because you started a young family at that point in time, I mean, do you think, looking back to your W-2 career and the early investing, do you have a better work-life balance now? Because I don't want to just assume you do. I kind of want to hear in your words. Like, I know in my story, I worked extremely long hours in my W-2 in the world of restructuring and turnaround and traveling all the time. So now, my journey was, yes, I had to figure out that first year. It was lots of ups and downs, but now my work-life balance is amazing. I love it.
Same.
Same
there's a lot of freedom that comes with it, especially when you have a team you can trust. So I like to spend time coaching, our leadership team, giving them advice on the best ways to grow, setting, really aggressive targets for the business. But it is it is definitely a lot more freedom, a lot more balance.
Okay, I love hearing that. And I know people listening to this will be inspired by that story as well, hearing it from, people on this show. So I want to finish like the order here. So you've got electrical contractor, then you've got the fiber optic cable company and the splicing company. And then finally, number 5 that I want to add in is this trailer manufacturing business that you bought
Yes.
last year. I'd love to hear about that and then some of the lessons that have come out of that.
This once again goes with the saying, mistakes were made.
Right.
So my partner and I, we thought, hey, let's diversify. We've got this mini private equity mindset. We're buying these companies. So far they've all been in construction. Let's diversify to manufacturing. And hey, we're going to focus on an area that manufactures things for the construction space. So there's just so much synergy, was the thought process. We actually purchased a trailer manufacturing company that is 2 hours away from, our current construction location, but it did not have any leadership. So the previous owner, he really was trying to get for a fast exit because he told us he was dying of cancer. He had a lot of health issues and really wanted to get this transaction done. Being the bleeding hearts that we are, we sped through due diligence. We thought, we've done this a number of times. We've been successful, and we're gonna keep this going. Even if we've got to turn around a few things, hey, we've got the skill sets to do it. It's the problem with believing your own legend. And so we bought this business. We came to find out the old owner did not have cancer, didn't have health issues. He just wanted to cash out, and so he made up the financials. Was actually showing a big loss. Counted all deposits as revenue without showing cost items in the financials. So hey, this business is making a ton of money. Well, that's what happens when you don't actually show the COGS line in the income statement. So we spent about 18 months fixing that business. So we got it to a really good place. We helped coach a lot of the talent that was there, got really good team members who are now in positions of leadership. And then we actually just recently exited so we can concentrate on the construction business.
Oh, so you exited?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It is the problem with divided focus. To have too many things going up in the air. The construction companies are growing at, a 40 to 50% clip. And I think if we had, the undivided focus, we'd be much further along, showing more of that hyper growth than more the linear growth.
Okay, I like that a lot. That's a good point to draw out. And so then on the diligence, I realized that you had compassion and kindness for this guy, but how did you do that diligence process? Did you hire someone to do financial diligence? Yeah. Did you do it yourself?
We did not do it well.
Okay.
Yes, we did do it ourselves. And so we didn't have certified financial statements. It was internally prepared statements, which were the biggest issues. He also had a couple of other companies, so when we looked at tax returns, everything was commingled. So we were really taking him at his word. And I think there are a lot of people that you can do that with. So I don't want to come off as jaded or somebody who, will turn away all the other opportunities out there. But it is coming back to trust but verify. So you've got to be able to get to, hey, are these the real numbers? And having an attorney do a deep look into the actual seller, not the business itself, but hey, who is this person? I think is a valuable lesson in this way.
That's a great point. Look at the person, do background checks. Is there any kind of judgments and other things out there that you need to know about? It gives you an idea of character.
Yes.
Well,
one of the things I was going to say is, when you have your attorney do that check, the bigger red flags for me that came up that would have kind of helped this is if you see somebody who's cheating on their taxes, I think they're not going to be afraid to steal from you. Yeah, everybody hates paying taxes. Everybody, wants to minimize it to the most that they can. But as soon as you see that they've been caught, that they've crossed a line into, tax planning, into, really theft, you've got to have something that goes up and says, "Hey, let's re-examine this."
That's good. I have a kind of a rule now, which is, like if the seller lies to me at any point, then that is indicative of maybe bigger problems or other things that could happen down the road. So it's kind of similar. It's like, hey, if they've lied on their taxes, I think they could probably lie to me and steal from me as well. So I think that's great.
Absolutely.
What is your advice to people in terms of performing? Because someone might be put off by that story, and I know lots of people who are in this successful position have had these like bumps up and down along the way.
Yeah.
But how do you recommend other people approach financial due diligence?
Yeah, so there are definitely third party services to utilize, or if you don't want to go the route of, you know going through certified financials, that process is somewhere in that $20,000 to $30,000 to have it done. Just run it through your own CPA, right? Depending on the size of the company. If you're looking at a company that is, 4 to 500K in EBITDA, or at that range, they're probably calling it seller discretionary earnings. Make sure that you're bouncing it off of your attorney as well as your CPA. Just get another set of eyes to look at. I think is the important part. And I know that some folks may be discouraged based off of some of the stories that I'm saying, but really, you've got to be willing to take the hits. And one of my favorite movies is Rocky Six, right, where he gives that speech to his son about, hey, you've got to be willing to take the hits because that's how winning is done. Not everything is going to work out picture perfect. It's not going to go to plan, but if you keep on pushing through, you're going to ultimately come out better on the other end. You're going to win.
It's so true. Like, I think when you're not a business owner, you kind of glamorize being a business owner. And don't get me wrong, it's awesome. But it is like some days it's just like, hey, I'm just not going to stop. I'm just going to keep going. And then you
Right.
eventually get through whatever the thing that flares up that you never thought would come your way. It comes your way. You're like, hey, I haven't faced this before, but hey, I know what I'm going to do. I'm just not going to stop. I'm just going to keep going. And
Yeah, there's so much of it that you just have to figure out along the way. That just won't go according to plan. So.
I don't know if you kind of relate to this, but if I look back to my 12 and a half years in it's a prestigious W-2 job, which, textbook, it looked good on paper. Well, if I look at the last year and a half of running my own businesses myself, I've improved so much in the last, couple years doing this versus the much longer period of time in, a respected job. It's part of the things you're talking about. You just have to figure out, and that has made me so much better.
I agree 100%. So when I was at my W-2 job, same thing, very prestigious, very lucrative, fantastic place to be. And I think for a lot of folks, hey, if you're afraid of getting kicked in the teeth, that's the place to be. If you're not willing to take the hits, it is a risk reward game. So be it the W-2 job, but if you're willing to put yourself out there, and if you're willing to say, hey, I know things are going to be challenging at points, but I'm going to do it anyway, I'm going to find a way, then you're going to come out better on the other side. So we started off our first acquisition, 7 people. We now have 70 team members under the Miller umbrella, and we're going to continue to grow. I think at the end of this week, we're going to put another LOI out there.
Really? Oh, congrats.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. So in terms of the future, you've narrowed your focus into the things you're already doing. You want to do it with excellence, and then you're doubling down on these industries. So you're continuing to look for growth in the industries you're already in.
Correct. So we're looking at both organic growth as well as growth through acquisitions. And those acquisitions have to be bolt-ons to the existing platform. We've really thought, hey, we can't fool ourselves into thinking there are synergies where there are not. So they have to be bolt-on businesses, and whether they're the same industry but different customers, or a different aspect of the same industry that we're in today, that's really got to be the focus.
Okay, and your businesses, are they all of them under the same holding company? Are they kind of separated? Like, how have you thought about that kind of structure?
So once again, we didn't move forward with a plan. We just said, hey, let's just get this thing. And so we formed individual LLCs for each acquisition. And then on top of that, we have an S corp that we're moving all of the LLCs on. But at the very beginning, it was we'll just form an LLC because our attorney told us that was the thing that had the most flexibility. So
I think that's sensible advice. Honestly,
yeah.
It's like, don't spend too much time on the front end worrying about the structure and not doing the acquisition itself. Like, yes, of course you need an LLC. You're not going to buy it in your personal name, but like, get the business, and then you can worry about the holding companies and things like that later.
Yeah, because I've seen a couple of folks go after their first acquisition, and it's not a huge dollar amount, but they're setting up very complex structures. So they'll have C corps, that have preferred shares. They have common stock, the whole nine. It's like, well, you're buying a $2 million business. Why are you setting all of this up? I mean, ultimately, that's going to cost you a lot more money from, whether it's a preparation standpoint, tax standpoint. Just set up the basics and then go from there. Focus on growing the company. And then as you move forward, then look at things like, hey, you use your LLC, file as an S corp, and when you need the protections of a corporation, then move that direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. If you spoke a bit about this as it relates to trailers, but if you're looking back, what thing do you wish you'd done differently? You don't need to use the same kind of deal. It could be one of the other deals, but is there another thing that jumps out of like, man, I wish I did this differently?
Yeah, I think once again it comes back to trust. I don't want to ever become somebody who's super jaded or who who expects the worst out of people. So if I get kicked in the teeth again because hey, maybe I'm a little bit more of a bleeding heart than others would be, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with paying that tax. I think it's more just being a little bit more thoughtful in due diligence in the things that people are saying. Just taking this a little bit of a grain of salt, but not going too far the other direction.
Right. No, I think it's rooted in really good character traits for you, like the things you're talking about. But I think that's great wisdom. So my final question for you today is, there's going to be a lot of people listening to this who want to buy that first business. And so what kind of piece of advice do you want to leave people with? Like kind of pearls of wisdom from you about how they can make that happen, or one thing that maybe they just need to focus on to get to that spot?
Sure. So there are a lot of things from like a financing perspective. You can do traditional banking. You can do seller notes. Always recommend a seller note. But at the end of the day, just do it. Just get an LOI out there and start the process. Because so many folks get stopped at the analysis phase. And yeah, like I said, things aren't going to work out to plan, but you've got to be willing to make the jump.
I think that's awesome advice. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Where can people find out more about you and your companies?
So millermn.com is the business website. I don't have a huge social media presence, but that is something I'll pick your brain about a little bit later, James.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.